Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. I spent a little bit of time last night walking around my neighborhood, just thinking about things. And I spent a lot of time in the book of Revelations today. What I was studying was having to do with the angel mentioned in the Revelations who measured in human measurements. And I came across this one video that spoke a lot about solfeggio. And I was talking about it. I wrote about it in my comments as well as description boxes. But a lot of people focus on solfeggio because it's numbered frequencies. And there have been a lot of issues in history because the government made an unhealthy mandate having to do with music as far as being out of tune 440 hertz rather than 432 hertz. And these ascending scales are very important because they keep people healthy if they're in the right alignment. And I noticed that they put them in wrong alignment. They make them, people have been studying these things ever since the 1960s, 1950s, 1920s. And it has to do a lot with angels in heaven. NASA satellites actually have recordings of my name being called out in space, and it's not mistaken identity. The good thing about these things is even when I was in the Air Force, I had a lot of this stuff going on. When people wake up mentally and they're healthy and they're happy and their frequencies are right and they're in alignment and their energy is not off and it's on and it's not negative energy. They talked about this a lot with parts of the brain being activated, like the pineal gland or the hypothalamus. And Jim Carrey also spoke about this once. He spoke about this sacred liquid that goes from your body, and that's where the story of Santa Claus came from. And people always said that Santa Claus was a pagan holiday, and it's not. Even they said Valentine's Day. They said Valentine's Day was an actual pagan holiday, and it's not. Valentine's Day is surrounded with Lupercalia. But if you go back to Revelations 22, 13 through 21, it says Jesus is the Alpha and Omega. With Christmas, it has to do with the Christmas tree, obviously, but there's all these, I don't want to say they're hidden innuendos, but they just make sense. When you go outside and you see a living tree, it's rooted properly, it grows straight up, the star on top of it points up, it doesn't point down. When you look at the Vitruvian Man, the star always points up. Those that put the star down, they're doing something mischievous. Unless you're in outer space, and your position changes and you're being perpendicular from something, obviously you're going to have a different view of things. But I looked at it, and yeah, the star points up, the cross points up, unless you're a vampire sleeping on the ceiling and you have to know which way is up. But that was the only way I could think of that anyone would advert that. Unless you're sleeping on the ceiling like a stalactite and your Christmas tree is hanging from the damn ceiling. That's the only way I could think of for a reason, unless you were satanic or any of those things. And Solfeggio is on the Israeli flag, and it was given to us by the angel Metatron. And I spoke about Solfeggio once. They probably thought that Solfeggio was Metatron, but Metatron's an angel. Had to reiterate on that. And when people look at the actual appearance of angels, they always think about stars, even with the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And you see all these things that have to do with radiance, luminescence, brilliance, light. And there's over 178 verses in the King James Version Bible that have to do with light. Nikolai Tesla even spoke on about it, and it makes you think about that movie Dogma somewhat, where they were talking about God, being in the presence of God. It will, some people can't take it, you have to keep your distance. And if you're around the awesome voice of God, then your head will explode and your body will cave in. And that's what one of the actors on the show talked about. But then it made me think also of Ezekiel 10:4, being in the court of God, as well as Isaiah 3:13 through 26, and how those that are innocent, if they are harmed, then they have their day in court, all the way back to Genesis 7:2, when it talks about people are of dust of the earth and water of the earth. But the very beginning of the Bible, it says God created light and it was good. And many people are of light. So you're talking about elements of the universe, alchemy. So you're light, you're water, you're of earth. Some people actually comprehend that, earth, water, fire, wind, all these elements. And when I talk about Constitution, some people think I'm talking about the U.S. Constitution, and I'm not taking that off the table by any means. But when I was speaking about Constitution, there's a lot of things in the Bible that are out of the Bible now, like the anti-slavery. There's things come in threes. So I left a message, a comment, just sensible things that I was studying, and it helps me validate a lot of things. And all men created equal under God, things of that nature. But there were huge issues with the Catholic Church trying to have dominion, or if you've ever read Dominion, it's purely satanic, or elements of ecclesiastical law, or Papal Bulls 1493. Papal Bulls entirely, it's like saying Daddy Bull. And the status of Moloch in Leviticus 20, that's a bull. It's a brazen bull looking creature that people used to sacrifice their children to. It was pagan worship. And now in Rome, all these things are going on. And you see all these erections, and I'm not bowing to them whatsoever. I'm not. But you see all these erections of statues or different kinds of monoliths. And even in, I'll put it like this, even in Michigan, right? Now, you looked at the erection of that satanic statue. Many people were really against that. Or in Detroit, they have this. It's like a portal. It's really. It's a lot of mentalism, but it's esoteric as well. And there are some good things about it, but there are some bad things about it that are obvious. So if you get all these different kind of statues and monoliths erected, it looks as if they're trying to change jurisdiction. But if you look in Revelations, it states that Jesus is given jurisdiction. He is the Most High God. And then you also think about people becoming the living word. So that's where people actually get the extra verses about light from. I've got two different Bibles. I mean, I like my King James Version Bible, but I've also got the Gideon's Bible. And it says right on the inside of the cover, this is a free gift, and this book is not to be sold. But there are things inside of it that many people don't, they don't know the works cited of it. And I started talking a lot about definitions having to do with divination, divinity, diviner, and it sounds like wordplay, but divine nation. So in the Bible, it also talks about men of God. So you're made, and this is not secular to just men. I mean, women have the same blessings. If you look at the Vitruvian man and the Vitruvian woman, and some say that we don't have a Vitruvian woman, but yet we have women outside, and they speak for themselves, which isn't bad at all. In history, they I mean, you know, history is very dark, morbid, grim, but you always see these things coming out, and women are exercising their abilities. And it's where symbolism comes in. And I don't read horoscopes. I've had people try to say, "Oh, he's a typical Capricorn," and I'm not even a Capricorn. I mean, there's more than 13 horoscopes. It says in the Bible, don't go along with horoscopes for the reason of it's like depending on a stranger to determine your life for you when you're given the gift of free will. And back in ancient Egypt, there were creatures known as jinn and angels. Obviously, there were serpentine creatures that shape-shifted. But nowadays, you're looking at people that are experimenting with their Psalms 1 and 2, meditating on the word, focus meditation, breathing meditation. And then when you get into the word meditation, it always intertwines with Buddhism. But Jesus, he had to know the mudras. And there's this very famous yogi, he focused on that and explaining it. And he's determining things how he can. He's a good guy. I mean, you know, people have all these things, but he made a statement about Jesus said, "Me and my Father are one." And back in those times, you know, if you go in the wrong direction and say that, it sounds pretty messed up. It kind of sounds, depending on who you talk to, it's like, what do you mean? You want to elaborate on that? But all these things that come out of the Bible, they're innate. You're groomed with them. You learn them over time. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, all through the week. You know, you get with your friends, you get with your family, and you motion on all the good. And it's like the Buddhists say. I mean, when they look at things and they think about the yin and yang, the positive and negatives, the higher vibrations, the lower vibrations, the goal is to push out all of the bad, push out all of the yin, and it's nothing but yang. So you think about it, you have either the possibility of becoming a dark black hole, or staying in the middle with yin and yang, or being an all positive, bright, concentrated ball of yang. And Buddhists actually focus on this when it comes to seeking enlightenment and helping others and doing it for a duty. Bodhisattva comes up, and Jesus Christ actually achieved Bodhisattva. Solomon did, Muhammad the Prophet did, Moses did, and I'm not keeping it secluded to them. There are many people that did before them as well as after. But back in Egypt, idolatry was huge. I mean, it was, you had statues of Sekhmet, Horus, Anubis, but they left Wepawet out. And Wepawet's the opener of ways, and he actually leads straight into the principalities of Jesus, having to do with altruism, alpha and omega, sigma, betas, deltas, and gammas get recycled. They have to learn more. They have to study more. When I was in the military, they had this phase program, and they also had, you had to stay on track with your studies and your tech school and things like that. And it's not that it wasn't a bad thing. Some people weren't ready. So some people aren't ready, so they need a little bit more time. Even when evaluations or red lines or things like that, you had to be a certain weight. They wanted to keep you fit. They wanted to keep you hydrated. And that was service-wide. Many people train harder than others, and they get so far into their training, they're just diesel. They're cut. They go past the six-pack abs. They jump over 200 pounds, and women do it easily just because they stay focused on it and they get in their routine, their regimen. Men do it easily. But you look at other kinds of strengths as well. You look at physical strengths. You look at mental strengths, psychological strengths. Some people, geometrically, they flower, they blossom. Their physical strengths grow up, their mental strengths grow up, and their psychological strengths grow up. And it sounds, their conscious strengths, you are a light being, you are made in the image of God. Even when you stand up in the morning and stretch your arms out, you're making the symbol of the cross. You look at the skeletal system from your tailbone all the way up to the tippy top of your skull, and your collarbones, your shoulders, your scapula, you're made in the image of God. And even angels, they find just the anatomy and physiology of what angels are. You're talking about light and consciousness and other creatures in creation. It's a lot of naturalism. It sounds like all alchemy, but it's a lot of naturalism. You get a lot of mixes in there. That's where you get all these chimeras in history. And you look at the definitions of vampirism and cannibalism, and you see all these different kinds of things, like the study of vampires before Vlad Tepes Dracula. You're talking about beings that look like cynocephaly with wings, or the Sphinx, or depending on which direction you're going in, an angel with wings. And many things were set in stone, but free will is what changed the variables, and conscious thought as well as unconscious thought, not to mention DNA restrictions, and you look at a lot of that stuff, even in Ancient Aliens, the show, or Discovery Channel or History Channel. And I was dwelling on it because the human body, as well as the earth, has a frequency. that's where a lot of faith healers, they comprehend these things, and even they are considered diviners in some way or another. People always thought that divination was bad, and it's not. I mean, if you look at it's a necessary thing, even now to dowsing in the Middle East and Egypt. Things were in their baby stages, and then as well as getting better. But you're looking at situations where it says in Luke 1:15 or Quran 590, don't consume wine or hard drink, and that's a big one for me because it's a depressant. It messes with your pineal gland, it messes with your organs, it messes with all kinds of things. And Jordan Peterson spoke about it. Many other people have spoke about it. Food, Drug, and Alcohol Administration talked about it. And you're looking at things that, as time progressed, it was almost like they were trying to make it legal. Even back to prohibition, they were like, no, 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 we can't have alcohol. That's one thing we can't have. And then the price of it dropped, and you looked at it, and people were doing bad things for money. They were trying to get rich quick, and they built empires on evil. And in the Bible, it says abstain from evil. And you look at all these principal walks of life, the principles that some carry, it's made certain generations of people rich by doing evil. And then for me personally, yeah, you live and learn. Everybody, when they actually get older, they hit 21, they have a beer, wine, or take a shot with their friends. And I mean, even with growing up in the early 2000s, you could not turn on the radio without running into a song that had to do with taking drugs or using alcohol. And I'm abstaining from that. I'm completely against it. Not doing any drugs or alcohol. But you look at things like DMT, and that substance, and it's even produced by the human body, but people find it in the air now because the DEA's been burning cannabis, peyote, salvia divinorum for the past, before I was even born, in diapers, and the war on drugs. And you look at it, and then we have forever chemicals in the water, as well as in some of the foods that people have been imbibing. And you look at the mind state of our history. For instance, I love looking at architecture, but Boulay actually, he's a famous architect, and he would always, I don't want to say he was out there, but he focused on the Bible a lot. And from Carl Jung to Leonardo da Vinci, they both read the Bible. Boulay read the Bible. And there's this Starry Night dome that Boulay drew, and you go into it about 150 meters, and there was a female architect she was studying, and I'm an admirer of hers, but she was actually expressing the detail that she was talking about. But even that had the effect of light and brilliance and luminescence. It was almost as if you're in the dark, like behind the veil, but the light was still coming through. So where I'm going with this is, that's why Nikola Tesla said everything is frequency, light, frequency, vibration, and energy equals light. Even the human body. But there are all these eureka moments that are positive, positive equal positive links in a chain. And has nothing to do with algebra, even though that was from the Middle East, because algebra teaches people that it's a negative and a negative equals a positive, and two wrongs don't make a right. Some people do want to add algebra to everything in life, and that's not really common sense. That's why the stock market crashes. If you empty your bank account and then take more than what you have in there, two negatives are not a positive. And people are figuring that out all the time. Or when the Above Majestic documentary came out and people found out that a lot of the books in the libraries are misinformation, they're counterintuitive. People were figuring out, and the Above Majestic documentary is about the secret space program. But even with ESP, extra sensory perception, that's not extra. You are hardwired biologically. You have, I don't want to say technology because it's biological. It's not technical like a cell phone or a camera. And yet you have two eyes. You have irises that can focus and move out, much like the history in Egypt on Horus's eyes. And they came out with a really good movie having to do with that, but people weren't thinking about that. They some things they think are allegorical, like and I really it kind of is a cringe situation when you hear someone say, drink the blood of your God and eat his flesh, but you're thinking about blood, sweat, and tears going into a book, and it was all compiled by witnesses. And Psalms 1:1, it actually took me to other books. So did Revelation, so did Genesis. You're talking about philosophy, mathematics, alchemy, angelology, demonology, psychology, astrophysics. Even the Song of Solomon, it talks about CPR, but some people don't see it like that. In the military, there are a lot of things that are ingrained in it, and many of the things in the military have to do with Native Americans, as well as all tribes of men and women. And that's why I said Papal Bulls 1493. That's satanic, because it was a satanic contract for indigenous genocide of men, women, and children. And that's